the only one kind of run? Are you taking roll, doing all that? You're running this?
Yes, I am.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. We're in your capable hands. Thank you so much.
Hopefully. All right.
The only one kind of run? Are you taking roll, doing all that? You're running this?
Yes, I am.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. We're in your capable hands. Thank you so much.
Hopefully. All right, Mr. Chairman, we are live on YouTube. I think we're ready to go.
Okay, thank you.
And in terms of attendees, you can see them now over here. It looks like there's about 8. So.
Okay, let me pull that up. See, 8 attendees. Okay, very good. And good morning, members, and welcome. And Ms. Bodwin, can you please take the roll, and then we'll get started. I think we're live and ready to roll.
All right, Mr. Chairman, roll call. Representative Baker.
There he is.
I'm here, Mr. Chairman, on Representative Jennings. Mine just got kicked off.
Okay.
Representative Gray.
Here.
Representative Hallinan.
Excused.
Representative Henderson.
Here.
Representative Jennings.
Here.
Representative Roscoe.
Here.
Representative Sweeney.
Here.
Representative Yen.
Here.
Chairman Harshman.
Here. Here. Thank you. Okay, just a couple reminders to our attendees that will soon admit here, and to members, of course, mute your computer until you're ready to talk. And I think with just a few of us, you can just raise your hand, and if for some reason I can't see it, go ahead and please just frankly butt in and give my attention. For oral votes, we raise our hand so folks in the public can see us, and then if we do happen to take a break, I suspect we'll kind of work right through and get finished, but make sure we turn everything else off. And I think, I'm looking at our attendees are well-seasoned veterans of the process. All the debate goes through the chair, so we don't make any of that personal and discuss this. So all those, and then I think that's all of our reminders. I guess if we have any other amendments, those kind of things, just email the entire committee and Ms. Bodewin's, and then we have that, and we'll go from there. So members of these 2 bills, and you members returning on the committee, these I think came to you in December. Is that correct? I'm just kind of looking for a head nod. It's not like these were started last spring. So these came, I think, in December. And really, I think with 45, you'll remember last year when we, the bill, I think all the enforcement, the timeline piece was all in session statute. And so it's the attempt to codify that. And then 60 is also a process to kind of actually kind of maybe strengthen the process, move it forward, change it a little bit. And I think we'll hear those little differences today. So I thought, members, probably be easiest if we can pull both these up, kind of discuss them both. And then and if nothing else, kind of move them both forward. I think that our counterparts down the hall were more kind of keeping them both moving forward. And I think we'll hear some of that probably today in testimony and kind of see where it takes us. So if we've got both those bills on the table, Senate File 45 and Senate File 60, and then I guess I would just ask maybe Director Noble, maybe Jeremiah Ryman with county commissioners, folks who have really worked this, maybe Pete Obermiller, folks who have, if we can admit, I think we can admit these attendees. There's 8 attendees. I think we can admit them all, Ms. Bodwin. And then I'd like to see maybe if the director revenue would be able to kind of talk us through some of these. Director, that's what happens when you show up to a meeting. Get put on the spot. So.
Morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning.
Good
morning, Director.
Okay. I'm Dan Noble, Director of the Department of Revenue. Morning to members of the committee as well. Thank you for allowing us to testify today. If I can probably give you a good 30,000 foot level view of what both these bills do, and what they're designed to do is to either eventually begin the collection, monthly collection of ad valorem taxes, as opposed to the current schedule, which is done at the county level. And these bills were created by a need for moving that payment schedule forward. As you know, ad valorem taxes can be as much as 18 months in arrears of what the actual assessment date of the tax is. And there were some bankruptcies in the last few years that created some difficulty as it relates to the counties being able to know exactly when these taxes became delinquent, and once they were, it was in the bankruptcy, it was pretty much too late to act on them. So these bills are designed to move that payment schedule forward and begin collecting the tax eventually, in the case of Senate File 45, on a monthly basis on the same schedule as the mineral severance tax. Both values that are developed are the same values and are taxed on the same value for both mineral severance taxes and for ad valorem taxes. Obviously, the ad valorem taxes is assessed at the county level by the county treasurer, based on the mill levies that have been set during that budget year. Senate File 45 is actually somewhat of a, I guess I'd call it an amendment to House Bill 159, which was passed last year, which was a schedule that was bringing forward I guess I'd call it a phase-in of monthly payment of ad valorem taxes. And what this bill does is it actually memorializes what was codified in the session laws last year, the schedule on when those taxes will be paid. This is what it does is it actually puts it in statute as to what the payment schedule will be, and then it provides some level of penalty provision should these payments not be made on this schedule. That's House Bill 45 in a nutshell. The amendments that were made during on the Senate side actually just moved the collection authority from the counties to the department back a year, because we're going to need some time to actually get this system up and running. There will be code changes necessary to make this happen. And so the amendment was made to move it from 2022 to 2023 for the department to have access to do this. That being said, the difference between Senate File 45 and Senate File 60 is that Senate File 60 actually kind of codifies what happens in subsection A of House Bill 159. It actually, in January of 2022, begins the payment of ad valorem taxes on the same schedule as mineral severance tax and on the same values. In other words, when you pay your severance tax beginning in January of next year, the same value will be used to calculate the ad valorem tax, and it will be assessed on the mill levy in place at that point in time, or an average, an estimate of the mill levy in place at that point in time. That's the major difference between the two bills. House Bill 60 immediately gets to the monthly collection of ad valorem taxes and on the same schedule. What it does do is the previous year's production is then put on a payment arrangement for 12 and a half years to pay off the previous year's ad valorem taxes over time. There is also a loan provision put in it. I believe there's $40 million appropriation to establish that loan for counties that are going to need to have the money up front in order to deal with the shortfall that there will be in the collection of that previous year's taxes. So what it does is it provides a buffer for them to make that payment. The companies will be making one extra payment a year on a monthly basis for the payment of the previous year's ad valorem taxes, and the counties will be on a loan with the treasurer's office to offset the fact that they're not going to be getting that money up front. And there was a cash flow analysis done by the LSO, and it was determined that 40 million should be enough to handle that shortfall because of the fact that they will have cash flow coming in from the new payments of the ad valorem taxes. And I believe Dean Temte is the one that did that analysis. I'm not sure if he's here today, but he can certainly provide that analysis to you folks if you need it. And with that, I'll stand for any questions you may have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, very good. Committee Director, really appreciate it. Committee, any questions? Director Noble? Representative Sweeney?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In 60 on the repayment schedule, I noticed 0% interest to the counties, which I'm fine with. Was the intent as a placeholder?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Sweeney, I'm not sure that I can answer that. I believe that there was a discussion in Senate revenue about whether that would be at 0% or whether it would be associated with the cost of capital, but I believe 0% is what was decided on. I'm not sure that not sure I would characterize it as a placeholder. I think there was a discussion about whether to have an interest rate associated with that to offset some of the costs that the state's general fund would suffer from it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Representative Roscoe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Noble, I'm just a little bit lost on all this, but so the $40 million loan, is that coming from the stabilization account, and or where is it coming from, and how much has it been figured out at all? How much Wyoming would be losing in the interest they could make on that $40 million over, and is it over 12 years that loan would be out there? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Director.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Roscoe, I believe that there was a discussion with the Treasurer's Office. I don't think that there was a number established as to what the cost of capital would be by moving that money into the loan provision and having it paid back over 12 and a half years. But there was a recognition that there would be a cost of capital by foregoing those dollars and having them paid back over time. I can't answer what that actual number would be, but there was recognition that there is obviously a cost, an opportunity cost, if you will, associated with using these funds in that manner.
Okay, other members? Vice Chairman Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, I appreciate your background summary. Help me remember, it's my understanding, if I recall right, that, there's not that many who are in default or, behind. Sorry, maybe that's too strong a word, behind, trying to catch up. Have you got an idea how many are in that category, or should we wait for asking one of the folks to testify?
Go ahead, Director.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Henderson, I don't have an exact number for you. We could certainly get that information for you of what the current status is. I believe this was brought on by a couple of bankruptcies back in around 2015-16 timeframe. And, there was a significant amount of revenue foregone through the bankruptcy process. And I think there's probably some people that can give you a much better number of what that actually is. But that's really what generated this, was that there was a significant amount of revenue lost, and there was a concern that this could happen again, and that the way that the mechanism was currently in place, the ability to react quickly was problematic based on the ad valorem side of it. We know on the severance side, within several months, whether there's a delinquency out there that we need to react to and file liens and take collection action. And it takes, before it even becomes delinquent on the ad valorem side, it takes over a year, as much as 18 months before the recognition that there's a delinquency out there. And that's what it was designed to do.
Right. Thank
Quick
you.
follow-up, sir.
Sure.
Quick. So just to be clear, I'm trying to understand where the best place is for monitoring and thereby being able to understand and perhaps provide some assistance in terms of scheduling of payments, whatnot, and timing. But it's my understanding that at the state level, you don't know for several months what the status is on the payments. Is that correct, sir?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Henderson, it is about two months and 25 days before payment is actually due on a tax. Now that puts them into delinquent status, and we don't immediately file liens. We go through some collection action before we file a lien. So you're probably maybe 4 months out before we actually take an action like that. But it is much sooner than it is for the ad valorem piece.
Okay. Any other questions for the director? Well, Director, we appreciate all your service, and I trust you'll stick around through this process this morning.
Mr. Chairman, I actually will be here, and I have another issue to discuss when the time comes associated with the appropriation to get these bills, the administrative cost of getting these bills ready to go.
Okay.
It was not dealt with in appropriations on the Senate side, and we're going to have to do something because this is not going to be free.
Why don't you just, while you're here, why don't you, I noticed there were, you had the impacts, but there was nothing in the fiscal note. So go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, there are two different issues associated with these bills. Senate File 45 actually moves from the county collecting the tax to the department collecting the tax in about another year and a half, the way it's currently structured. And one of the problems with it is we're not collecting the tax until much farther down the road, based on the value of the mineral that we assess the mineral severance tax. So we actually have to come up with a separate system, if you will, in order to be able to assess tax on two different values simultaneously. One for severance tax and then one for the ad valorem tax, which will be a different value. And we need to assess those taxes on a different schedule, which means creating pretty much a separate system to make that happen. That's going to be expensive. We use the mineral tax system was written by a company called Managed Business Solutions. They are the people that actually manage the system for us now. And at this point, I was hoping to have an actual estimate from them, and they haven't delivered yet. But this is a fairly complicated issue, and it's going to take some time for them to really get their arms around what it's going to cost. But we've done a couple of other estimates on the sales tax side that involve some pretty major changes, and it was close to $1 million for that. I did contact the enterprise technology folks to have them be involved in this process, so that when we do get those estimates, they can kind of scrutinize them and see if there's something that we're missing or something that is problematic. But it is probably about close to $1 million, because we're talking about pretty much rewriting the system. When you look at the Senate File 60, the existing system in place can probably be utilized to make this happen, because we're going to be using the same values. We will use the same forms. We have to add some fields in tables as it relates to what the calculation will be based on. And then we have to have a payment system to get it back out to the counties, as well as a reporting system to provide them with how those mill levies were established, or those tax bills were established, and who's paying the tax. So that'll have to change. But I think it's much less of an exercise than it would be by actually coming up with a separate tax system. I would guess, and believe me, this is not a semi-educated guess as to what it will be, and it's around $300,000. We're hoping that it'll be less, and quite frankly, if we get the estimates back here in time, we'll certainly share those with you. But my thought is it's going to be much less in administrative costs to get this system up and running, because of the fact that we're using the same values. Should be much easier.
So, Director, so really, I mean, as I listen to you explain this, and have patience with us, but I think, I mean, Senate File 60 really gets us up to a monthly, I mean, it gets us on the same schedule as severance. Senate File 45 gets us closer than what we are now, but really doesn't quite get us up to the same schedule. Is that the issue?
Mr. Chairman, as it stands right now, it doesn't move the needle, if you will, starting adding extra payments, I believe, until 2024.
Yeah.
And that just moves us 1 month at a time over the next 12 and a half years, or 12 years, if you will, to where we're on the same schedule as we are with severance. But it is a gradual process. One thing that it does do is it doesn't require the upfront loan back to the counties, because of the fact that these payments are being, if you will, being added by the industry on an annual basis. The loans being paid out over a 12 and a half year period.
Okay, I think Representative Gray has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Noble, appreciate your work. You know, I wanted to ask you the conversations and appropriations. I mean, every year, the state takes over some duties of the counties, and the counties usually only end up paying 25%, if that, of the cost that the state is undertaking. And it's become a huge reason why we have this deficit, is that all these functions that the counties were supposed to be doing, for some reason, every year that they pick 4 or 5, and the state ends up taking them on, and very rarely is it 100% match. It's never 100% match. So, I mean, is there conversation on the counties paying for this? I mean, at the end of the day, you know, sorry, I just had Chairman Eklund here, but at the end of the day, I mean, this is the counties that are getting the benefit.
Director?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure I'm the person to ask that question. I mean, during the task force meetings we had years ago, that discussion was held. I mean, there was a discussion about it. There was some concern raised about it, but I'm probably not the person to answer that question directly. I think there's probably other people in the room that could provide a better answer. What you're presented with today is the result of those task force meetings and some discussions. I think when you look at the way that Senate File 45 and 60 differ, I believe there's probably a bit of that discussion in both of those bills. You'll notice that there is not an appropriation on one bill, and there is on another. So that could very well be by design, but I can't answer the question directly because I wasn't involved in the formulation of 45, and Senate File 60 itself is really something that is kind of an evolution of Section A of House Bill 159.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Director, sure appreciate you joining us. I think I'll go ahead and open this up to some more panelists. How about from the counties? Oh, I see. Hold 1 second. I think I saw a hand. Now my screen's moving. Okay, Representative Jennings, I think. Do you have a question, Representative Jennings?
Yes,
Look at
Mr. Chairman.
your fingertips right there.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you and Director. Can you refresh my memory? How many counties have experienced these losses, the bankruptcies, say, in the last 25 years? Is this focused on just a couple of counties or is it across the state? If you could just refresh my memory. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Jennings, you know, the major concern that was addressed was associated with a couple of bankruptcies that happened fairly recently. But there have been issues over the past years associated with delinquent taxes. I'm probably not the person to answer that question directly, but I see that Mr. Riemann is on, and I think he can probably give you a much better answer to that question than I can, and I'll defer to him on that.
Okay, thank you. And the director will be here if we have any further questions. So again, appreciate you. Go ahead. Do you have a follow-up, Representative Jennings?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So between these two bills, because they affect a change differently, do you see a conflict if we pass both? I mean, it sounds to me like there's an appropriation out of 60, but not in 45. So does the department see a conflict if how we move forward with two bills that are addressing somewhat of the same question? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Director. I can maybe.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Jennings, I believe that the purpose of this was to keep these bills alive on a simultaneous basis so that at the end of the day, one of them will live and one will die. And I believe that the way it's been discussed in previous meetings is that 45, Senate File 45 will probably be a fallback position because it accomplishes something that was left out of the previous bill, House Bill 159, and actually, at the very least, it memorializes what the payment schedule is in statute, which wasn't there because it was done in session laws before. But the idea is for one of these bills, when they reach the finish line, one of them will be voted down and the other one will pass. I believe that's my understanding of how they were structured.
Yeah, thank you. I think Representative Roscoe has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Noble, I was just wondering, in your opinion, does either of these bills give us, I can see how we're going to be collecting the delinquent taxes, but does it give us protection from future bankruptcies? And might be, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Director.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Roscoe, I believe that it accomplishes one thing, which was to move up the payment schedule so that the counties will be aware of this issue much more quickly than they are today. That there are delinquencies that they can take actions against on a much more timely fashion than there are today. Will it stop bankruptcies and things like that from happening? Of course not, but it will put us in line, if you will, on a much better footing than we are today. In other words, when we file liens for severance tax, they'll be able to file liens for ad valorem tax on the same schedule. Because of the fact that they'll be aware of it, and those taxes will be delinquent on the same schedule. So I think it benefits the counties by moving the time frame that they have to file these liens and get in line in a bankruptcy. I believe that there's even some lien provisions that provide them a super priority lien on some of this, which would put them in front of everybody, and that's kind of how they deal with other ad valorem taxes today.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, I think we'll move on to Jeremiah.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Jeremiah Riemann here on behalf of Wyoming's County Commissioners. Appreciate the opportunity to address this issue. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to start with just a little bit of information to try and answer some of the questions that have been asked before I get into the heart of my testimony about each of these bills. Mr. Chairman, I am joined this morning by Mr. Bill Novotny. He is the chairman of the Johnson County Board of County Commissioners, and he also serves as our association vice president. So he is also available to answer any questions and to provide testimony. Mr. Chairman, there's been reference to money of the counties. And I want to be very clear about what mineral ad valorem is. The county is the tax collector. When it comes to ad valorem in the state, roughly a little bit more than 70% of that funding goes to schools. That's state money. The next portion of that, roughly 15 to 17% goes to special districts. So at the end of the day, the county is only collecting for itself, with the exception of a little bit that goes to some municipalities, is only collecting about 12% of that money for itself. Again, the vast majority goes to other entities. We are, again, the tax collector. There's been some question about why the 0% interest loan to the counties. Again, this is not our money. We're asking for the vast majority of it is not our money. We're asking for a loan for a variety of other entities, potentially even including the school districts. And I know we'll have perhaps a conversation about that. And we would potentially be asking on behalf of special districts. So what we asked for in the Senate conversation is to have the same favorable terms that we're going to provide industry under this approach, under Senate File 60, of 0% interest for that period of time. And we hope that you will maintain the approach that the Senate took. Mr. Chairman, there's been a question about delinquencies. I want to start off by saying, Mr. Chairman, that the vast majority of companies in this state are responsible taxpayers, and it's important to note that at the very front. Our intent with both of these bills is to find an approach that is favorable to good companies, but helps us to address the bad that exists in the system. Mr. Chairman, there's been asked a question about, well, how many counties are we talking about? I collected data on behalf of LSO during the mineral bankruptcy discussions last year, starting in tax year 2009. I've continued to collect that information since that time. My data shows that only 3 counties have not experienced some sort of a mineral ad valorem tax delinquency. Those 3 counties being Teton, Platte, and Teton, Platte, and Goshen. The rest of your counties in the state have experienced some level of delinquency. What does that look like? In the early years, it was roughly a little bit less than 1% of companies were delinquent during that point in time. And considering the vast amount of money that we're talking about, it wasn't as tremendous an issue, but it has gotten worse. It has gotten substantially worse over the course of the past few tax cycles. In the last complete year of tax collections, we're sitting at about 10% delinquency rate across the state. 65 plus $1 million was delinquent in that time frame. That doesn't count the agreements that the counties were able to establish with some companies during that time. The year before, over 40 million, or roughly $40 million worth of delinquencies. We've seen the number of companies that are delinquent accelerate. We had less than 100 just 2 tax years ago. We're now at over 275 companies that are delinquent. So it has gotten worse, and we would hope that you will continue to work with us as we've been working with our partners in industry to find a good place. Mr. Chairman, there's been some question about our motivations that we're trying to shirk our responsibilities. And I will tell you, Mr. Chairman, under Senate File 45, I don't think the counties would have one issue with continuing to do the tax collections under that bill. We've been doing that. The counties this last year took on the administrative expense on behalf of the whole and on behalf of the school districts, on behalf of the special districts, to work with their vendors to make that tax collection. If you wanted to have us continue doing that under Senate File 45, we would. Mr. Chairman, as it relates to Senate File 60, it's a different beast. We're not necessarily asking to shirk our responsibilities. What we're doing is providing administrative convenience to the companies. That system will line up with the severance tax payment system. So rather than the companies having to make a payment to the counties as well as to the Department of Revenue, they can go through one process, perhaps one form, through one entity to make that payment, and the state then works with all of us at the local level again to make those distributions. So, Mr. Chairman, those are the comments that I wanted to provide in response to the comments that I heard here. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make some comments about each of the bills.
That'd be great. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, we are requesting that you continue to advance both of these approaches. As has been stated, one of them will have to fall by the wayside. Our preferred venue is Senate File 60, but again, we need Senate File 45 unless in the event that we find a major issue as we continue to work quickly through these administrative considerations. As it relates to Senate File 45, again, the director did a good job. That is simply codifying in law what was already established in House Bill 159 last session. We think that at a bare minimum, that is what is needed out of this approach. Mr. Chairman, Senate File 60 is again our preferred venue, and we see it as one, easier to administer and understand, easier to administer and understand for counties, for the state, and for the companies that will ultimately have to pay under this system. Mr. Chairman, it also moves to a true monthly system. It lines up with severance tax, which was the intended goal at the end of House Bill 159 at its full completion. It also completes the entire transition. So as Mr. Noble said, all of those back payments, all of that 18 months of minimum ad valorem will ultimately be paid. Under this approach, there is provided companies a 0% interest rate to do that over the course of 13 years. And as important in all of this, Senate File 60 doesn't require any additional legislative action. If you look at House Bill 159 from last year, it contemplates the fact that you would still have to come back as a legislative body to complete that transition. Mr. Chairman, I did provide a spreadsheet to all of you this morning. This is a spreadsheet that all of the other partners in this process have seen. But what I wanted to do is to help illustrate the transition and why a couple of pieces are so important.
Mr. Reman, I'm wondering, would it be helpful, I guess, and I'll ask the members too, if we share this, or is it easier if we just all open it and you talk us through it? And everybody on this screen, I think, has seen this, it sounds like.
Mr. Chairman, I can go either way.
Members, what's your privilege? I've got it pulled up. I can look right at it. Members, do you have it pulled up? Ms. Bodwin?
Mr. Chairman, if I could get a copy of that emailed to me, that will help me considerably in tracking these.
Okay. I am going to forward that. I think too, I can share this screen, right? Ms. Bodwin, I think you gave me that option.
Yes, you should be able to.
Okay,
Mr.
good.
Chairman.
I'm doing that. I'm going to do that right now here. I think this is the one. There's the Excel sheet right here. Okay, let me share this. Okay, can you all see that?
Mm.
And you,
Mr. Chairman, that was the Senate File 45 approach, and so that one may be familiar.
Here's the tab right there. There it is.
And if you want to click on the second tab, there we go.
Yeah, just did.
Great. So members of the body, what this is intended to illustrate is how this will begin to play out. You will see we made some adjustments in the Senate, which ensure that counties will receive both a 50% payment in May of this year, as well as a 50% payment of past mineral ad valorem in November of this year. The Senate File 60 contemplates that the monthly transition will start with July 1st production in 2022. What that means is that the first payment will come into the Department of Revenue in March of 2022. That's why you see the color coding starting with that month. The counties won't actually receive that money from the state until roughly April of 2022. And to make it more complicated, the schools and special districts likely wouldn't get their first money under this scenario until May of 2022. Simply just going through the administrative steps here. That is one of the reasons that is necessary to have the loan provision. There is going to be a lag between the start of production and collection of payments, and that creates in some ways a fiscal cliff. The other issue that is presented by this transition is the fact that production levels currently are less right now than they were in past production. So what that means is next calendar year, we're actually going to be collecting on a lower production number than we otherwise would have in the old system. So that is another important reason to have the loan provision in place. Now, as the spreadsheet shows, starting in December of 2023 on the right hand side, we begin to receive 8% payments on that back mineral ad valorem starting in December of 2023 and running through December of 2035. That would make the transition complete in December of 2035. So the counties will, as part of the whole system, again, as the tax collectors, then use that money to help pay back the loan that they took in the earlier stages of this process. So, Mr. Chairman, I hope that calendar helps to explain and illustrate how this process will work. Mr. Chairman, I did present the committee with two proposed amendments to the bill. I sent those in an email to all of you yesterday afternoon. As I stated in the email, I have shared these with the other stakeholders in this process and have received no negative feedback. Mr. Chairman, the first of those is on page 2, lines 1 through 4. This is something we tried to fix in the Senate. What we had been presented with, and we really thank our partners in industry, particularly Pete Obermuller, for identifying this issue. The original language would have suggested that counties could not distribute taxes until final reconciliation in December of 2023. That created an issue. So we asked the Senate to make a small amendment. What we found out as conversations progressed is that there are really two tax collectors that will happen here. The Department of Revenue will be collecting on that monthly basis and then remitting that back to the county for distribution. But when it comes to final reconciliation, that will actually happen at the county level. And so the county will collect those monies directly from the entities. So what this language is intended to do that I've presented to you is to correct that issue and in consideration of those two approaches. Mr. Chairman, the second amendment that I've provided to you is on page 4, line 9, to delete the word delay and replace that with the word transition. That's not intended to be an expansion of the provision, but rather to ensure that counties, on behalf of all the stakeholders here, can access the necessary resources for those two different issues that are created by this transition. And that's why I use the word transition. So, Mr. Chairman, appreciate your favorable consideration of moving both of these forward. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Members, questions? Mr. Riemann. I'm looking, I don't, and I took your suggested amendments and I sent that to LSO staff last night. They returned those last night. I've shared that with the committee about 9 o'clock last night. And so we've got that ready when we get to that bill. So appreciate that. And that, was there a question of Mr. Okay, I see hands up. Representative Gray and then Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Riemann, appreciate the comments. I do want to push back a little bit on the suggestion that I was suggesting that the counties are shirking their duties. I mean, I didn't get into motivation. Whether it's the legislature or the counties, I mean, the reality is it's happening. And I don't like to bring comments into motivations, but it's just a fact. I mean, I've seen 5 attempts just on the Judiciary Committee the last 2 years, and a couple of them failed, but a couple of them passed, and they add up. I really do believe that. So that leads into my question, which is that I appreciate your comment that the counties would be willing to pay for this under Senate File 45. So can you repeat to me again why under Senate File 60? I mean, your comments that the counties would be willing to collect under Senate File 45. So I have 2 questions, which is why under Senate File 60 are the counties not willing to collect? And that's my first question. And then my second question is, would the counties be willing to pay for the state's costs to set up this system? As Mr. Noble laid out, there is going to be a cost, whether it's Senate File 45 or Senate File 60.
I think too, and maybe Mr. Riemann, maybe explain a little bit how the counties really are the state, and maybe talk about our, part of this issue too is we're one of the few states put the limits on any revenue that you can raise on your own as well. So you have to come begging to us to either send it to us or allow you to increase revenue to actually do it. But Mr. Riemann, you want to answer that? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Representative Gray. I would dispute the notion that we've tried to shirk responsibilities in other areas, but that is not something I intend to debate here. Mr. Chairman, the difference with Senate File 60, and I want to make it very clear, it's not that we are suggesting we wouldn't collect this money. It's that as administrative convenience, it works out better for the companies to pay to one entity, because what we end up doing under Senate File 60 is aligning the severance tax payment system with the mineral ad valorem tax system. So a company will be able to go to one entity and paying their bills, doing their reporting, and the other administrative responsibilities that come with that. So it simply is an approach that we think is more favorable to the companies, but under no circumstances are we looking to shirk our responsibilities. And if we wanted to make it more complicated for the companies, then certainly you could continue to have those monies collected by the county treasurers. I think that they enjoy collecting revenue. That's their job at the local level. Mr. Chairman, as it relates, of course, counties are the local arm of the state. So we are one in partnership here and have many responsibilities that we carry out on your behalf and certainly work in partnership with you. The question about whether the counties would pick up the administrative tab of the Department of Revenue, absolutely not. Again, this is not money of the counties with the exception of 12%. So if we're talking about any portion of that perhaps $300,000 administrative fee, that would be the only portion that could be assigned to us. The rest of that is special district and state responsibility through the schools. But I would hope we don't have to get into that sort of a machination over that particular issue. And I would also point out that the Department of Revenue was provided $500,000 in administrative support last year in House Bill 159 for tax collection. Part of the argument for that perhaps was to help with the tourism tax administration that was going to change, but that was contained within House Bill 159. So the department has been provided some funding. So in answer to the question, Representative Gray, absolutely not. We would not look to pick up that portion of the fee.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Riemann. To me, it seems like there's no hidden agenda as to why the counties and everyone would support Senate File 60, because I mean, there's a huge loan there, so they get all this money up front. It's a huge benefit to them. I guess to me, the idea of carrying forward two bills for the sake of just doing it and having a placeholder, I don't really think that that's good for our people and good for the state, because I think it sends a mixed signal. I think we need to go ahead and pick a horse and get on the carriage and do that. But I guess my question is, it revolves around the proposed amendment and Amendment 1, and it's on page 2, and it says after page 5 after line 2, insert, and then there's a bunch of language in there that references the school foundation. And I'm just wondering, was that brought by industry, and did industry discuss that? Because it seems like some of the changes that we're hearing here, it seems like it's a little late in the game to have these changes, and these are huge monumental changes to the bill, but we're having these discussions in the House Revenue Committee. So I just want to know where industry stands on that. And then I guess my other just concern is how come we haven't identified the cost to the state previous to this? It seems like a $300,000 cost in Senate File 60 and $1 million cost in Senate File 45. Seems that we would have that identified way earlier in the process. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the comments and the opportunity.
Okay, Director, and I'd like to move to maybe Mr. Obermuller and get industry's perspective. Unless Mr. Riemann, do you have any final? And we can come back.
Could quickly.
Sure.
Representative Baker, in terms of picking the horse, I think the collective of us, and I'm not just saying it's the counties, but industry and others, have all advocated for continuing to move both bills forward so that we can continue to address the technical components of this, of Senate File 60 in particular, to get it in the proper place and still have that fallback if we need it of Senate File 45. I don't think this is the time where we drop that horse. Certainly that could happen in the process. Somebody puts it in the drawer later, but I think we need both of them as we continue to work through these things. Mr. Chairman, Representative Baker, benefit to the counties. The loan is not a benefit to the counties. That's to ensure that the counties and all of the benefactors of that minimum ad valorem don't go off a fiscal cliff in the next calendar year as a result of the transition that is ultimately going to happen here. So we're not asking for additional money to prop us up. We're just trying to keep the ship rolling at the levels that would have otherwise been expected had we not made this transition. Now, that's made up by those back payments. And so the state has a strong guarantee, and that language is in the bill. Cost of the state, I really think that perhaps is a discussion with Director Noble and you know, the process that he's undertaken to get that fiscal administrative process. That's not anything from our side. And I think you had one other comment about that. I'm blanking for a second. But I did want to respond to it. I apologize if you could repeat.
Mr. Riemann, I think really that, and let me, to summarize this really, I mean, counties aren't going to, there's not going to be the big payment. That's going to, and so that big payment, so there's going to be a shortfall initially because you're getting smaller payments monthly. And to compound that, the big payment that would be coming is off higher production. And so you're going to get smaller payments off smaller production numbers, and you're going to need a little bit of bridge as that big payment gets paid off over the next 12 years. And that's what we're talking about, really. And I think you'll see our staff identified the problem with the school piece, and I've emailed this to the committee really to appropriate, not because the loan thing could be problematic because it has to come through the counties, it looks like, and then the counties would all distribute it to schools and all that, and really to make it simpler, to amend that just to appropriate that to the schools, and then it gets caught up over time as those payments get leveled out. So,
and Mr. Chairman, you just reminded me it was relative to the other amendment. Mr. Baker, if I understand you, you're referencing to perhaps the school portion of an amendment. That's not something that we brought, but it's something your staff identified as an issue and what I think they're trying to present to you, not that we are.
Okay, thank you. Representative Roscoe, and then I'm going to go to Mr. Obermiller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This will be quick. Jeremiah, I just wanted to know how the counties feel about on page 3 of 60. The loans would be administered or given out on a first come, first served basis. Are the counties comfortable with that? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good question. I had a question about that. Go ahead, Mr. Riemann.
Mr. Chairman, I'm working from the engrossed version of the bill. And I believe the first come, first serve language was removed by the Senate amendment. So that was something that we asked to be removed.
Very good. Okay, I think Representative Hallinan has his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would think that the agency that collected this money from the various companies would have the benefit of the float on that money. So wouldn't that be true that the counties would benefit if the counties got the money, and the state would benefit on that float if they got the money? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
I guess I'd ask that of Mr. Riemann.
Okay, Mr. Riemann, any comments on
Mr. Chairman, Representative Hallinan, if I understand you, at the end of the day, our intent is that the counties, the special districts, and the schools don't drive off a fiscal cliff here in the first part of this transition. Right now, the bill contemplates that the county would be the entity requesting that loan. Maybe under some scenario, that is the state, but this contemplates that the county would be in that driver's seat.
Okay, Representative Sweeney has his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on the if a county decided that they needed that loan, so in March of 22, they begin collecting on this journey of 12, 15 years. on the catch up or the repayment, how is it designed in your mind? So you get a check for $50,000 in that first month. Do you take half of that and start repaying the loan back in your mind on how that works in the repayment process?
Mr. Reaman?
Mr. Chairman, under Senate File 60, counties are going to have to start the process of considering the budgetary impacts fairly quickly. As you all know, they will start setting fiscal year 22 budgets in March and April of this year. So they're going to determine whatever that fiscal impact is based on what I just presented to you in the spreadsheet. And then they have a decision, to request that funding of the state. Some of them may say, we're not going to do that. We're going to use reserves, assuming they have reserves, and that's a big assumption. So, but some will go after a loan to ensure that the entities don't go off that fiscal cliff. What I envision from there is that they will enter into an agreement with the Treasurer's Office to pay that back over some set term, not to exceed the 13 years that we're providing the companies, and that loan would be guaranteed against the additional 18 months of minimum ad valorem that will be captured starting in December of 2023. And so the state does have an assurity that those funds will be repaid over whatever agreed period of time.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Reaman? Okay, I'm gonna move to Mr. Obermiller and give us the industry perspective, as you've been heavily involved in this. And I see Travis Detai is here with us as well. Good morning.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. Pete Obermuller, President of the Petroleum Association of Wyoming. Isn't this fun, members? This is a good one. So I actually, honestly, Mr. Chairman, I feel a little bad for particularly the new members on the committee, because this is not new. We have been debating these issues now for 3 sessions in a row, and we have made, you all have made sort of interim steps throughout this entire process to let us where we are today. And I think it's important that we not lose sight of it, because it has to do with why we're moving 2 bills and why PIW is on the same page as the counties in terms of the importance of moving 2 bills forward. And I'll get to that in a second. But recall, Mr. Chairman, it goes back to an important question from Representative Roscoe about will the bill protect Wyoming, I assume he meant, from bankruptcy. Quite frankly, the answer to that is no, but that's not what the purpose is. The purpose is not to protect from bankruptcy so much as a legitimate tool that all businesses use. The purpose of these bills is to try to protect the counties and thereby the schools and the state's ability to collect taxes in bankruptcy. So, Mr. Chairman, recall where we all started on this 3 years ago was that by design of the legislature, there was a tiny little exception in the ad valorem tax statutes that in opposition to every other business category and every personal category in the state of Wyoming, moved counties below essentially banks, bona fide creditors, in terms of the tax lien priority. So when a company went bankrupt legitimately and all the creditors came to collect, counties were below the bona fide creditors. So we attempted to fix that, and in fact, you all in the House have on second reading today a further fixing of that issue, where counties now are moved above bona fide creditors in tax liens, so that when there is a bankruptcy, counties are first in line after a certain point. So that's number one in terms of the fix. The second fix is what we're talking about today, which is trying to accelerate the gap, close the gap between when production happens and when taxes are paid. The theory being, of course, that if you know, in the old system, when there was an 18-month lag, if a company went bankrupt in year or in month 12, then you have and counties were below on the tax lien, then you have lost that amount. If you start paying monthly, then you've collected more along the way. And then if there's a bankruptcy, and then in conjunction with the tax lien fix, then the state has collected more of the revenue that it is owed and is on the hook for less in terms of a bankruptcy scenario. So last session in House Bill 159, we started this journey, and it has been a journey on how to make this switch, because it is, as Representative Baker pointed out, this is a monumental change. This is we're moving into very, very different territory here, both for the state, the counties, and for the industry. And what we're trying to do is match it up as best we can with severance payments. So in the case of moving two bills, under current law, what legislators established last year was a partial solution. It gets about halfway there, but not all the way there. And that halfway there, that move to the schedule was non-codified. So a new company that comes into the state of Wyoming and looks to see what their ad valorem tax obligations are and how to pay it, you can't see it. It's not there. You have to know to go to look at session law. So if Senate File 60, which is the one that we also prefer, goes off the rails, then we need 45 at a minimum to keep going. That's why they're both moving. It's not some hand waving or kabuki dance. We're all working in tandem to try to get SF60 to the point where we're all agreeing, and we're very, very close. But in case it doesn't work, then that's why 45 is moving forward. Okay, so deep breath, Mr. Chairman, about the bills themselves. Couple things I want to point out. You know, Mr. Reeman's absolutely correct. Appreciate his comments about the vast majority of my members and mineral industry being good neighbors and paying their taxes on time. That is true, and it is true to a great degree, and it means a lot of revenue to the state. Over that time frame, Mr. Reeman, you know, did his calculations. Oil and gas ad valorem paid was just over $6.4 billion. And over that particular time, the delinquency rate was 1.75%. So now he is right, it has ticked up in the past couple of years. And has become a bit of more of a problem as we've dealt with, you know, it's pretty unprecedented factors in the mineral industry. So, you know, it's even at 1.5%, it's big dollar. You know, when Sports Authority goes out of business, we don't have task forces to figure out how to collect their delinquent ad val, right? Because they don't pay. Really, it's only minerals that pay on this, so that's why it's a big deal. It's the volume of money, not the percentage. So, what Senate File 60 does is and this is an important point, it makes this policy switch on behalf of the state. And a policy switch of this magnitude has some costs associated with it to the department and to the counties and to industry. My members have to go through a pretty sizable change to make this work as well. So the compromise approach under 60 is that we do it pretty quickly in 2022, and I have some members who are worried about being able to be ready by 2022. Be that as it may, and then you take 3 payments, 1 full year of production and 1 half year of production, and it's dropped into a back payment bucket, paid off over the course of 13 years. 12 years at 8%. So I want to make sure everyone understands what that means, because when in 2022 we make that switch and start paying back in 2023, the state will be collecting 100% of what you would expect from ad valorem just on a monthly basis, plus an additional 8% for the next 12 years. So in terms of cash flow, the issue of the cash flow and the loans and all that stuff for the county, that's all about the mechanism of making the transition. But in terms of cash flow, cash is flowing from my members to you and 8% more than you would expect every year for 12 years. Mr. Chairman, if that's $400 million, which it could be, that's an additional $32 million coming to the state, more than you would expect every single year for 12 years. That, in contrast to when the state moved from annual payment of severance, we moved from severance from annual to monthly. That happened over a long period of time, and the state forgave the back payments and severance. We're not asking for that, and that's not the way we're doing it this time. So it's what we've set up here has basically works. There's some administrative issues we have to work out, Mr. Chairman, because what we're paying on is actually the previous year's mill levy rate, and so every single year the counties have to work on a true up. And so in the Senate, we asked for just a little amendment that made sure that when we're paying monthly, we call that, they're called estimated payments, so that when we make the true up payment at the end of the year, that is a good faith payment, and there's no penalties or interest attached to that. That's not considered delinquent at that point, because we have to go back to the current year mill levy and true that up every single year. But at the end of the day, we rip the Band-Aid off and we make the policy change that everyone is asking for, and we pay back over time with none of the credits or the interest rates or any of the things that bogs up the whole debate last session. So, Mr. Chairman, that's appreciate you allowing me to ramble a little bit there, but I'm happy to take questions.
No, it's great. All this has a story to it, and there's always more to the story, and so we appreciate you sharing that story with us. And I think I remember back in this deal a year ago, the last couple of years, when we formed the task force, there was some talk of forgiving it like we had done in severance. But so anyway, so moving forward. Okay, any questions of Mr. Obermuller by members? And I'm going to move to Mr. Detai if I see no questions. Okay, Mr. Detai, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Obermuller. Stay tuned.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the new members of the committee, I'm Travis Detai. I'm the Executive Director of the Wyoming Mining Association. We represent the state's coal companies, trona companies, uranium and bentonite operators as well. Hopefully get a couple rare earth companies and gold companies incoming soon. So, we've been working on this for a long time, as it's been stated before. And before I get too far into my comments, would like to just thank Jeremiah Riemann with the commissioners and Pete Obermuller with Petroleum Association, as they've done the lion's share of the work on this most recent effort. I came to this table kicking and screaming. And for those of you that have been on the committee, you've heard me say more than once, the vast majority of our producers are good operators. They pay their taxes on time. The reason we're here in the last few years is because of a few big foul ups, frankly. And but the fact of the matter is, that's under the bridge. We are where we are, and we're at the table now. And so I would echo Pete's comments that we would like to see both of these pieces of legislation move forward. My industry is not monolithic. I've got smaller operators and different sectors that are ready to go to a monthly payment system. They want to do it. And then I've got some other operators that it's going to be tough, under the specifically speaking to Senate File 60. It'll be a little bit tougher, but what you're seeing in front of you, and I will strictly stick to the industry side and the payment schedule. It's a work of compromise. And I think, when nobody really likes it, I think you probably come to a pretty good product. And I think that's where we are. With the back payment for the outstanding production year of 2020, the second half of 2020, and the full 2021 going into that bucket, starting in the payments in December of 2023, we can live with that. I mean, that's one of the things that we wanted. We needed time, and that gives us time. The ripping off the Band-Aid, it's ripping off the Band-Aid. Some operators are going to have a little issue with it, but I think, when you look at the majority of my membership, this is probably going to be the best way forward. So we would, Senate File 60 is our preferred vehicle. And going forward, we would, we would hope that you keep those dates in place. Let's stop monkeying with those payment dates, and that would be our preferred method. And with that, Mr. Chairman, we've come a long way. This has been a long process. But we're almost there. So I would respectfully ask the committee to move both the bills.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of Mr. Detail? Thank you. And here's, I'd like to, the attendees, I'd like to work through industry. I think there's two more, and then I'd like to finish with counties with and school districts, Mr. DeCary, and school boards and Commissioner Novotny. So I'd like to, Ms. Levin, if you could share your comments, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Jody Levin here this morning on behalf of the Trona industry. The great news for the committee is when you follow Mr. Obermuller and Mr. Detail, you really don't have much to add. So I would also extend my sincere appreciation to Mr. Riemann, the counties, and to Mr. Obermuller. It has been a long slog, and because of their hard work, we can find ourselves where we are today. So most of the policy issues that were important to the Trona industry were addressed in last year's debate. Starting the back payments in 2023 was a major issue for the Trona industry, in large part because we had major expansions that were announced or planned in the Trona patch where you already had significant capital outlays. And to come up with those additional payments, as Mr. Detail said, they just needed time. So without belaboring any of these issues, I'll just say the preferred bill is Senate File 60 for the Trona industry. We agree with moving both of the bills forward just to try to ensure that we get this right. These are major policy changes, and the process is benefited by making sure we get it right.
Perfect. Any questions for Ms. Levin? Okay, Representative Hallinan has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Levin, all three of the testimonies, including the county, have said that they preferred Senate File 60. So why don't we, as a committee, go ahead and approve Senate File 60 instead of keeping Senate 45 in there? Because that way the legislature knows what our committee thinks of these bills. And all the industries have come forward and said they preferred Senate File 60. So why don't we just go ahead and approve that bill only? Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Ms. Levin.
Thank you. Any comments on that? And then I can share a little process thoughts. Maybe go ahead, Ms. Levin.
Sure, Mr. Chairman and Representative Hallinan. I think the reason why industry is advocating to go ahead and keep both bills moving, and honestly, I think everyone in this process is advocating to keep both bills moving, is just to make sure that we have a backstop if there's a problem identified in Senate File 60. So we're still working through the administrative challenges of Senate File 60. And if something is identified last minute, we want to make sure that there is a fail-safe that at least codifies the work of last year's session, as Mr. Obermuller had indicated. So really, I think it's a matter of, and Mr. Chairman, I'm going to assume you're going to talk about this process of eventually one bill just stays in a drawer at some point. But moving them forward just ensures that we don't run into a situation of having nothing in the statutes because we have non-codified law from last session.
Okay, and Representative Hallinan has a follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is, these bills are going to be decided within probably a week's time. So what's the likelihood that you're going to find something in a week's time that's going to change your opinion on Senate File 60? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Ms. Levin?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Hallinan, I'd say it's not likely that we're going to find something, but we'd rather just have that extra protection so that in the event we do find something that's wrong with Senate File 60, you at least ensure that the work that happened in last year's session continues forward.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that's It's a good question, Doc Allahan. I think there's a lot of ways to probably do that. I mean, we could just simply take no action, on 45 today. It's not dead. The bill will just sit basically in the drawer. And if we need to pull it out, we can, or we can push them both to general file and ask the majority floor leader to, put one lower down than the other. And I think Mr. Detai, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I just had one other comment that I wanted to make before I let you get on to your other speakers here. One of the things that I think is going to be very important in this process, regardless of which bill comes through, is the communication to my members, to the operators. Whatever comes out of this, they've got to know what they need to do. So I think that communication between the Department of Revenue, between the counties is critical. My guys they're going to pay. But they need to know what to pay and when to pay. So regardless of what comes out of this process, whether it's Senate File 60 or the other bill, the operators need to know so that they can plan and they have a little bit of certainty going forward. And that's all I'd add to that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Is anyone else from industry that would like to comment? And then I think we'll go to Mr. DeCaria, former Senator, House Member DeCaria, and then I think Commissioner Novotny. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Revenue Committee. I'm Ken DeCaria. I'm the Director of Government Relations for the Wyoming School Boards Association. And we just wanted to add our support to this concept and these bills moving forward. I think it's important that it will smooth out a lot of transitions. I mean, if you go a long ways back, Mr. Chairman, when I was teaching in Uintah County 1, there were a lot of overpayments as well as underpayments that happened. And those, led to problems later on down the road. Especially in school districts with having to repay some of that money at those times. And so, Mr. Chairman, with that, we are supportive of this and happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. DeCaria? Okay, thank you for joining us. Okay, Commissioner Novotny.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Bill Novotny, Johnson County Commission Chairman with Wyoming County Commissioners Association. I'm not going to belabor a lot of the points that have already been made, but having been through the Special Task Force on Mineral Bankruptcy, we need to continue to advance the process of transition to monthly ad valorem. It's critical that we move both 60 and 45 forward to allow us to reach that final goal. This is not done to achieve any windfall or anything special or shirk any responsibilities for the county. I'm in a county where we're owed close to $30 million. We have 3 operators who continue to produce gas. We have no way to collect on it. We have multiple companies that are now in bankruptcy that we will never see a dollar, yet they continue to consume services within our county, chew up our county roads and use our resources. So this is critical for the health of your counties who provide those critical services, for the special districts and the school districts to move this forward. I can answer any practical questions on how this whole process works, but again, I would urge you to please move both of these bills forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any questions? Thank you, Commissioner. Any questions of the Commissioner? Okay, appreciate you joining us and all your work on this. I think Representative Sweeney has a question for you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner Novotny. Could you, in your mind, I mean, Jeremiah kind of explained the payback process in his mind, but your boots on the ground, how do you see if Johnson County so chose to borrow that money, temporarily to glide through, how do you see the payback process?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Representative Sweeney, we would use, should we need to tap that line of credit on a short-term basis to handle any cash flow issues. You'll recall that we're going to establish a budget based off of mill levy and our other revenue type sources. So just as we deal with now, when tax money comes in at different times of the year, typically it's 3 times a year, our treasurers utilize different options to manage the cash flow. So I don't see a county borrowing that money and then stretching the repayment out over 10 years. We're basically using bridge funding to make up short-term drop-in collections. So it would be borrowed and then paid back quickly as whether we hit the true up to get caught up with our companies, or when we hit that point in our annual revenue time, which is usually in the fall, if they choose to pay in September, folks that pay full amount of their taxes in January, or if they've split that final payment in May. So it's going to follow the work that our treasurers do to manage our cash flow and meet our expectations.
Follow up, Mr.
Go ahead,
Chairman.
follow up.
Thank you. So you're not looking at a 13-year, in your mind, you're not, for Johnson County, looking at a 13-year 2035. I really appreciate your analogy to a bridge loan. I can relate to that. That really helps me clarify. And I also appreciate your comments on keeping both bills alive. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Are there any other questions of the commissioner? Okay, thank you again for joining us. I think, is that everybody who would like to testify, comment to the committee? I think that's all our attendees. Ms. Bodewins, are there any others? I see we have a couple LSO staff attendees. Okay, members, I'd like to I'm looking at our time, and if we start running out of time, I want to make sure we get one of these through on the committee of the whole. Not that it'll be heard. Most of these will probably be in March anyway, just looking at our schedule. But I think it's important to know that these bills are both alive still, right? Even if we don't work one of them today. So I'd like to move on and start with Senate File 60 and get that bill out on the table, and we go to work on it here. And so I'm going to,
Mr. Chairman.
So I'd take a motion on that bill.
That's
So
what I
that-
wanted. Mr. Chairman, I move Senate File 60 for due.
Okay, thank you, Representative Henderson, and seconded by Representative Roscoe. Members, and then I'm just transitioning to get my computer screen up here. Okay, and members, I guess your pleasure. We want to, and I've got Dean, Mr. Tempty is here with us. Mr. Anderson from LSO, and maybe they can walk us down through the bill. And I think there's an LSO amendment that I sent to you, and I sent you an updated copy. Mr. Anderson and Mr. Richards and others had drafted when they're working through this bill. And then we have the proposed amendment by Mr. Riemann with the counties. And so I'd ask that, I see Josh Anderson has popped up, and Josh, maybe you can just walk us through this bill real quick, page by page on Senate File 60.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'm just getting into the meeting here, so I was probably behind some on YouTube. So you wanted me to go through 60 real quick?
And we can go through it pretty quickly, I think, and then explain maybe the amendment that you had sent to us and the thought behind that. I think we've got a pretty good grasp of this, and as we move it forward.
All right, let me find the bill here. Mr. Chairman, sorry. My computer's freaking out on me right now. Okay, so Mr. Chairman, as you kind of already heard, these are two bills that both deal with changing how we pay the monthly or the ad valorem tax on mineral production. So Senate File 60 goes in and amends what we put in last year, which is 3913-113, dealing with changing to a monthly payment of ad valorem tax. You'll see there's just really some pretty much conforming amendments on page beginning top of page 2, and then we add this new subsection G, bottom of page 2. Says notwithstanding subsection A of this section and except as otherwise provided in D and F, estimated monthly payments first due beginning with January 2022 production. And then it talks then about essentially the transition, because we'll be skipping over portions of the 2020 and 2021 production. So the first half of the 2020 production will be paid just as it is now on November of 2021. And then unless that full tax is paid by December 31st of 2021, which is how it's done in current law, they can pay the full tax by December 31st of that year. The remaining 50% of the 2020 production and all of 2021 production will be paid under this section, which that amount of 1.5 years is calculated by the department and the counties. And then the taxpayer makes an additional payment in addition to their monthly payments of 8% of that amount until the total amount is paid, which I think you've heard is about a little over 12 years to repay that full amount. And then if the taxpayer fails to make timely payments, then interest is calculated on the date that based on the date the tax would have otherwise been due. Was there a question, Mr. Chairman? Sorry.
No, that's fine. That's great. I just want to, and I think members have the copy of the suggested amendment. And so really, and you broke it down into really a couple parts, right? About the revisions 2113-310 and then about the loan program. And
yes,
so
sir.
Maybe walk us through that amendment.
Sure, Mr. Chairman. Yeah.
All the members have that, I believe. It's been emailed.
Yeah, so this would be the last numbers on the amendment would be H3701, Mr. Chairman. And so, yeah, as you note, it does two things. It makes some amendments to 2113-310, which is the computation of school district revenues. And then it also makes a change to the loan program that's at the end of the bill. So the first thing it does, and Mr. Wilmarth could maybe jump on and help here, but 2113-310, it relates to calculation of revenues. And so one of those things that are done are the revenue collections to be received by each district. And now with some of these revenues that were previously essentially estimated, we will now be collecting those monthly. And so we just wanted to kind of clean that up a little. So we go in a couple places and say revenue collections estimated to be received by the district. You can see in 2113-310A, I, and then subparagraphs A and B of paragraph 2. And then we also add a definition in subsection D that revenue collections estimated to be received means non-mineral ad valorem taxes due in accordance with 13107B1D and certified on August 10th, and monthly ad valorem payment of taxes on mineral production due under 3913-313. And so that's really just to try to make clear what those or how we're treating those payments. And I'll let Mr. Wilmarth jump in if he has anything to add.
Mr. Wilmarth, there you are. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Chairman. Matt Wilmarth, LSO. Mr. Anderson explained this pretty clearly. Just from a broader perspective for the members of the committee, the Department of Education and school districts estimate their ad valorem collections each school year. And with the change in the monthly payment of ad valorem taxes for mineral production, we wanted to ensure that the definition and the estimated collections are more clear. And so we are suggesting that these amendments to 2113-310 are made. And what this would also do is then lower the necessary loan to the counties by approximately $26 million in Section 3, because ensuring that the new estimated collections are based on this more clear definition in 2113-310, the Department of Education will ensure that the school districts either have their recapture payments lowered or their entitlement payments increased in fiscal year 22 to cover that anticipated decrease caused by that transition period. So that's the recommendation from LSO, and you'll see that further change in the loan amount on page 2, lines 20 through 31 of the proposed amendment. It lowers the loan amount from 40 million to 17 million, and then it makes a direct appropriation from the school foundation program account of 26 million to the Department of Education to ensure that in their administration of the funding model in school year 21-22, that anticipated decrease in revenues is accounted for in that calculation of either entitlement payments or recapture payments by school districts. So I hope that helps clear up some of that.
Thank you. And so when I received this amendment last night, and so then I talked to Mr. Richards, and basically this is how I understand it. And I didn't know this was the current loan program is kind of a first come, first serve, and the counties have to do it. And then they got to pass it on to the school districts and everybody else. And it's got to go through this whole process. And so I don't know whose idea that was this. Did you see this as a problem where you thought this was a way to fix this or clean this up?
Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee, there's a couple different issues going on here as well. It was not clear under 2113-310 how, if Senate File 60 were to go forward, how the Department of Education and school districts are to estimate the revenues on the new monthly ad valorem tax schedule. So we wanted to make that initially clear. School districts also are able to receive what we call a tax shortfall payment the following year, anytime the estimated revenues are lower than what is calculated under 2113-310. So for example, if a school district is estimated to receive 25 million in their 31 mill levies, but they only receive 24 million, the following year, the Department of Education makes a tax shortfall payment to ensure that the amount estimated the prior year is provided to school districts. So this takes into account that we're estimating on a actual schedule that's in the law. Otherwise, the $26 million would be paid out the following year in fiscal year 23. So we're anticipating under any scenario that districts will be receiving fewer dollars, but we're just accounting for that in actual school year 21-22 to account for the actual payment schedule in Senate File 60.
Okay. Okay. And so, yeah, getting that, and then the loan then, since school districts are out and have 70% of the mills, the loan can be smaller because it's just counties and districts that can go and get made whole during this transition period.
Correct,
then,
Mr. Chairman.
And then and just like the loan, this 26 million won't be an extra payment to schools. I mean, it all gets kind of made up and balanced out. Nobody gets more, nobody gets less, whether you're a county, a special district, or a school district. Is that?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. The 26 million is just to account for the lowered local revenues to school districts. Right. They're not going to get more out of the funding model. The state's just going to ensure that they get their required guaranteed funding level.
Okay. Is there anything else, Mr. Anderson, Mr. Wilmarth, on this amendment then? Do committee members have any questions of our LSO staff? Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question as far as the numbers and how they work out, because if you're deleting the 40 million, or if you're deleting the 40 million to account for the 26 million and you're inserting 17 million, it doesn't seem like the numbers work out, because 40 million minus the 26 million should be 14 million, not 17 million. So I'm just wondering where the additional $3 million is at.
I see Mr. Tempty has joined us. Go ahead. Good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. The actual total cash flow impact as amended was actually, my estimate was around 52.5 million. In the Senate, when the bill was worked in Senate revenue, they adjusted the total appropriation to approximate that, about 50. Where really the actual cash flow estimate was around 52.5 now, and then it actually, if you add those up, it now adds up to 53, just rounding to the nearest million, if you will.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, Representative Sweeney.
So how then, this is a guarantee back to the school districts, but I don't see how this flows properly with the counties that decide to tap that bridge loan, as Chairman Novotny put it. So how does this affect that repayment method on that bridge loan? I'm not quite tracking that.
Anyone LSO want to take that on for counties, right, Representative Sweeney?
Yeah, and the interaction with the school districts now. I'm a little on.
The school districts are out of the loan process, so the counties don't have to go to the state treasurer to get a loan for their school district with this proposal. So that takes care of that. So the counties would be stand in line for the loan proposal, the bridge loan for their 12%, and special districts is how I understand it. Is that, I see Josh nodding his head. Go ahead, Mr. Tempty, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. That 17 million approximate, I came up with approximately 16.5 million, representing the county share and the special district share.
That might need to be bridge loaned over. Okay.
Okay.
Good. Any other questions? We're all learning, so we appreciate your help this morning. Okay. Any other comments, LSO staff, on the amendment? Any? Go ahead, Mr. Wilmar.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know you're working Senate File 60, but it would be our suggestion or request that the amendments to 21-13-310 would also be made to Senate File 40. you would not, Senate File 45, Senate File 45 doesn't have the loan provision, so the amendments to Section 3 and Senate File 60 would not need to be made. But regardless of the bill that is enacted into law, we would request the amendments to 21-13-310 be made in both bills.
Right. Gotcha. And that was kind of on that memo that the letter that Mr. Anderson sent to us, kind of outlining those last night. You bet. Okay. Very good. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, members. Any other questions or comments then on Senate File 60 as we work this now? Any other questions? Okay, so let's just start working down through the bill on page 1.
Chairman,
go ahead.
I don't know if you can see him, but Dr. Hallinan has his hand up there.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Hallinan. My apologies. I think you're muted, Doc.
It's just a mistake. I have left it up there. I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, very good. Okay, so let's work through page 1. And the amendment starts, suggested by our LSO staff, starts on page 1. Do I have a motion on that amendment? Representative Yin?
Mr. Speaker, I'll move your proposed amendment 3701.
Is there a second? Okay, seconded by Representative Sweeney. Okay, discussion on the amendment. Representative Baker.
Mr. Chairman, you know, I do think they're two different issues. I don't necessarily want to divide the amendment, but taking the amendment, it's complex and there are multiple aspects to it. You know, I wish we had more time, honestly, because I do think that there's more conversation here and I feel like we're rushing it through. And honestly, my internet has been acting up, and so I haven't caught some of the conversation, so I feel a little bit disadvantaged. But I can't support the amendment because I don't think we can thoroughly discuss it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Members, I think I see this really as two issues. One is the cleanup. It looks like a lot, but it's really putting the word estimated in, right? To make sure that those payments work out. And it's not the actual collections, it's the estimates. And then the second part is really section 3 on page 2 of the amendment, which moves school districts out of the loan provisions through the county, which I could see could be cumbersome. And so those are really, I see it as two issues in this amendment. Okay, any further discussion or questions on the amendment?
Question.
Okay, question on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'll be 5. All those opposed? 1, 2, 3. Okay, 3 opposed. Okay, so that amendment has been adopted.
Mr. Speaker, I believe it was 4.
Okay, there you, I couldn't see you, Representative Gray. You're a no vote.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. I couldn't see you on the screen. Gotcha now. Okay, thank you. Okay, we had then Mr. Riemann also suggested an amendment to us. And does everybody have a copy of that?
So that's 702, Mr. Chairman.
I have that as 3702.
Okay.
That staff, the same email that you all got, I just forwarded on to our staff to have the amendment prepared.
Mr. Chairman, you have a couple of hands up, or had a couple.
Format. You bet. So I'm going to start with Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have an amendment, but we'll dispense with this one first. Thank you.
Okay. So we're on this 3702.
I'd move the amendment.
Been moved by Representative Sweeney. Is there a second? Okay, by Representative Henderson. Okay, discussion on the amendment. And I think it just clarifies, in my mind, the reason for this is to really clarify the when the dates are. And I think the way that bill's written now, it kind of strings us out over several months. And from when it's the 10th day to the final reconciliation. And so I guess one is a 10th and another date on another part of the bill. And I think it kind of cleans that up. So that's how I see this. Any other comments on it? Okay, not seeing any. Representative Sweeney, did you have a comment?
No, I'd call for the question.
Okay, all those in favor of this amendment, go ahead and raise your hand. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll be 6. So those opposed, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. Okay, that amendment has been adopted. Any further amendments to the bill? Representative Gray. Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just sent this out to the committee. It was drafted here. I got it back. The conceptually, well, I'll move the amendment that I just sent out. It's let me get the number up. 65701. I move the amendment.
Okay, I'm just pulling it up here. Okay, members, so you should all have that. And that is 5701. Why don't you take a minute and go ahead. So it's been moved. Is there a second? And then seconded by Representative Jennings. Representative Gray, go ahead and explain your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pretty simple. It requires the counties to pay for the creation of the system to collect the tax. And I just think that we see this time and time again where the state takes on a function that the county is doing. And I don't want to get into motivations. You know, that's not what this is about. It's about the issue. And it just, the state takes on too many of these functions that the county's taken on, and it's every single year. And at some point, when the state takes on a function the county is doing, the county needs to pay for it. So that's what this amendment does. It requires the county to pay for the creation of this system for the state to collect the tax. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any comment? Representative Yen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did want to have a different amendment on how to pay for this. I do think that making the 20 counties pay for this act versus the state pay for it is just deciding who gets their services cut more. And, you know, I think that really needs to be our responsibility, since we're the one making this policy change, for us to figure out how we pay for the administration of this transition. So I'll be against this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any other members want to speak on this? Just on my notes, I just flipped back on Senate File 60 that the director thought at the most this would be 300,000, because it's very similar to the severance tax collection. And I think, you know, we do other unfunded things. I guess we can move forward and keep learning, and, you know. Okay, any other comments? Representative Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would, I'm a no vote on the amendment. I appreciate the spirit of the amendment, but I think we heard in testimony from the counties that they're the collection agency for the state, and they're possibly not a gain, that's not the right word, but I think 12% was the figure I remember. So, you know, in fairness, do we then kick it back to the school districts and the special districts and then state a pro rata share of the new enhancements to the system in programming, because that's what we're talking about in this amendment rather than the counties. So I would resist the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any further questions or debate on the amendment? Okay, Representative Gray brings home on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to respond to a couple of those points. I mean, the reality is that the county was collecting it. So maybe there's the beneficiary is partially the school districts, which by extension, I suppose, is the state. But the reality is when you look at the split up of duties, and again, the counties are a creation in state statute, this was something that was given to the counties to do. And now the state's taking it over and they're not paying at all for the change in that role. And they're still collecting those general property tax mills that used to pay for that. And so I think we need to be equitable here, and this trend of just the state taking on all these duties and not, and the general property tax mills then being used for something else that used to pay for these duties. I really reject it with respectfully. And so I urge a passage of this amendment. Thank you.
Okay, so we're voting on Representative Gray's amendment 5701. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Just want to make sure I got it. Okay, all those opposed, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that amendment has not been adopted. Are there other amendments? Okay, are there other amendments on the bill? Okay.
Representative
Ms. Bodewins?
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Representative
Yen.
Representative
Yen.
Mr. Chairman, I'm curious to know whether this committee wants to put an appropriation on this bill and the other bill, at least so that the body knows how much each of these are going to cost. Or is it something where, because it already has a $1 appropriation, it's going to get kicked off to appropriations anyways, and then have them deal with it?
Kind of froze on me.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, my question was, is it something that the committee should do to put a more reasonable price tag, or because we already have a $1 appropriation, it's going to get kicked to appropriations to deal with the price tag anyways? Do you, or maybe a question to the body, to the committee is, do we want to have a message of how much this cost on both of these bills? Because they are going to cost differently, according to Director Noble. You're muted, Mr.
I was momentarily bounced out of the meeting and then reconnected. I think I got the gist whether we should put an appropriation in these bills.
Yes, sir.
My thing, I'm kind of interested about the appropriation we made last year in the bill, and that's what I want to research as we go forward. I think how much money's left over from that. I think we could bring maybe a committee of the whole amendment. This isn't going to come up until March, and I would keep working it. But so my thoughts are, I don't think we need to put an appropriation. I don't think it's that much money, frankly. Department of Revenue, $300,000. Okay, any other members, any thoughts? Okay, members, we're pushing up against our deadline on this deal. I think, are we ready to vote on this?
Question on the bill.
Ms. Bodewins, can you call the roll on the bill?
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote on Senate File 60. Representative Baker,
No.
Representative Gray,
No.
Representative Hallinan,
Aye.
Representative Henderson.
Aye.
Representative Jennings,
No.
Representative Roscoe,
Aye.
Representative Sweeney,
Aye.
Representative Yen,
Aye.
Chairman Harshman.
Okay, members, and I'd like to thank members of the public and industry and Director Noble and everybody, and we'll continue this work moving down this journey. So thank you, and we'll see you in the session here in a few minutes. Thank you so much.
Mr. Chairman, what do you want to do on 45?
I'm going to hold on to that. We're just running out of time, so I'm going to hold on to that, and we'll come back and work that at another meeting, maybe this Thursday.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.